We have lots to discuss here in today's video, including lots more speculation around some offseason trade activity. We're looking at teams like the Maple Leafs, the Blue Jackets, as well as the Seattle Kraken and the Nashville Predators. And we have some big updates on the future of a couple of important players with the Los Angeles Kings, including captain Anze Kopitar and one of their top other forwards, Kopitar Kempe. What does the future hold for each player? Will they be around with the team beyond the current season? We'll discuss that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here in today's video, lots more speculation on what we might see happening here over the next little bit with some player movement. I know we had lots of comments from a variety of reporters here, I know, in the last week, and John Shane is probably the latest one I've seen making note of it, saying that he feels there's going to be probably another secondary trade market open up, and we should see a good flurry of activity here sometime over the latter part of July, which will open things up to kind of have almost not really another free agent frenzy, because I thought free agent frenzy was a little bit on the weaker side this year, obviously with a lot of players re-signing and staying put, but it's still a decent market of players out there that are trying to find a new home, and obviously a lot of that is dependent on teams making other moves, either freeing up roster space, freeing up cap space, or just kind of weighing out all their options here. So there's bound to be a good amount of activity still. It's kind of at a standstill, kind of at a stuck point here. We should hopefully get teams making some moves here soon enough. Like, we did have a good stretch of time where we had they're all smaller and typical here lately, but we did have a good stretch there. There was like a trade every day or at least 4 or 5 trades over like a week period. But we should see that again, hopefully, with some more deals being a little bit bigger. I know one thing I want to talk about today as well is the Los Angeles Kings. We know that there's a lot of pressure, I think, on the Kings to get over the hump, and they want to be in win-now mode. They've made the playoffs 4 consecutive years. They've lost 4 consecutive series to the Oilers. First-round exits every season after being out of the playoffs for a while, after, of course, having a stretch of time where they were one of the more dominant teams, got a couple Stanley Cups, and then went through a lull in their success and kind of rebuilt in a different kind of way, if you will, and then now here we are. They're back more competitive, but they're also reaching a point in the team history where you're going to have some guys probably coming to the end of their pretty illustrious careers soon enough here, including Kopitar. Doughty's probably not too far away. And then, obviously there's some other players like Kopitar Kempe entering the final year of his deal that are obviously important to the team as well. General Manager Ken Holland did make an appearance here recently on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio and addressed some of those concerns. I know at one point Holland said he was hoping that he could sign Anze Kopitar to an extension. But there was previous reports, so I had reference from John Hoven, who's very well-connected Kings reporter, who said he does not think that's going to happen. He expects this to be Kopitar's final NHL season, and that is it. He's getting into his very late 30s. He's got a young family. He's accomplished a lot in his career, a lot of personal milestones. He gets, name on the Stanley Cup. There's a lot of boxes that have been checked, and then it's probably time for the next stage of his career. So, I was a little surprised to hear Holland say that right off the get-go on one of the first interviews he did after getting named GM. I said, well, clearly he hasn't talked to everybody yet and really doesn't know where everything stands, because I really trust Hoven's reporting. Holland on Kopitar's future now, in his most recent interview he did, says that he acknowledges the fact that Kopitar is not interested in doing an extension right now. Now, he doesn't say that it's going to be his final season. His words were that he's not interested in kind of looking at this at all until the end of next year. So basically let the contract play out, see how the season goes, and then we'll see if he's interested in continuing on or not, which kind of lines up better with Hoven. And even if he was told that it was going to be his final year, maybe he didn't want to come out and explicitly say that either, right? So it's hard to say what happens, but the belief is that he's probably done. Now, Kopitar Kempe, another big part of the team, entering the final year of his contract as well, is eligible for a contract extension and could be looking at a significant raise. Obviously, he's played a big role for the team. Ken Holland certainly made it known in this interview that he is very interested in extending Kempe and would like to get on that pretty quickly here. He says that he needs to get going on that pretty quick, and that he definitely wants to sign him to a long-term extension if they can work that out. And certainly he's a real important player for the team. And he said that all that he's heard, he believes at this point that Kempe would want to stay, would be very interested in doing so. So, there's belief that Kempe's extension, whether it be with the Kings or if he tests free agency, he's going to probably be $10+ million per year. I mean, the Kings, like I said, they could be losing Kopitar. They certainly don't want to lose Kopitar and Kempe both. I just wonder if Kempe, being aware of Kopitar's situation, and that'll impact him at all, and if he'll decide that maybe he wants to see how things play out as well. Obviously the team is, for a team that went through a recent rebuild, actually they went about things in a different kind of way. They really didn't see them graduate a ton of young players up through the ranks. They, between trades and free agency, really transformed this team with really very few prospects becoming prominent players. I mean, over time, we've seen Byfield's role increase, but even Byfield, where he was drafted, I think many thought would be a bigger piece of the pie here right now in LA. And as Kopitar prepares for retirement, his development and elevation of his role in game is going to become that much more important. If he can't take it up to another level to give you that same sort of type of play, then the Kings might be not as strong. It's just that simple. Drew Doughty, of course, getting, I'm not sure how long Drew is going to continue to play, but, obviously he's a little bit younger than Kopitar, so wouldn't be surprised if it's a few more years, but obviously, he's at a stage where you just don't know either. And, without him, what kind of team would they look like without Kopitar and Doughty? So it's interesting to see what they'll do, but obviously the team wants to sign Kempe to an extension. We'll see how things work out. I just wonder with Kopitar's situation if that will impact his decision or not. Time will tell. Now, as I've mentioned, a variety of other teams we want to take a look at here and some updates. Some of this comes from Nick Kyprios' most recent trade bait article that came out just a few days ago. We've kind of talked about bits and pieces of this over the last 2-3 days. One name that we haven't talked about yet is the Seattle Kraken's defenseman Jamie Alexiak. Alexiak has been on the market, according to Kyprios, and I believe this to be true because I've seen other insiders make mention of this here in recent months, that he's been basically available on the trade market since before leading into the trade deadline. So it's been quite a while. I know there was a point when you heard a lot about Alexiak and Carson Soucy's names both being out there. Of course, Soucy was subsequently moved. Alexiak's still there. Then, of course, in free agency, they go out and signed Ryan Lindgren. So that kind of adds even more likelihood that they would want to move on from Alexiak's contract if they can. I mean, he's 32. It feels like he's been around the league forever, and he has been around a long time, but he's still only 32, so I think he still has some game left in him. He's got 1 year left on his contract at $4.6 million. I think if he does stay in Seattle, if they're unable to move him, his role is definitely going to change and probably be a little bit smaller, play less minutes, but clearly he is a name that's out there. He's got big size, obviously a huge guy. And, there's lots of teams out there that would want to, you would think at least, be interested in this type of player. I think the contract, more than anything, might be a bit of an issue. I know lots of teams have more cap space than usual with the big bump we saw in the cap this year. But still, $4.6 million, if teams want to see him like on a third pair or something like that, that might be too much. Seattle might have to retain some money. Maybe they've been reluctant to do so. I'm not sure. But obviously, he's a name to watch here as teams are still looking to revamp things. Obviously, we talked about the comments off the top. There's expected to be a flurry of activities still. Well, there's a number of teams out there that are looking for a variety of help and are not happy with the early trade market around the draft and free agency, that they didn't get stuff accomplished that they really wanted to, and are still trying to make their teams better. So there's still lots of chatter going on. Just we haven't seen like a major trade here in a little bit, but there's been, like I said, a bunch of smaller ones last week, which kind of hoping will lead to something bigger here with some of the other teams that are expected to do so. I know Kyprios' article also talks about Nashville. We know that, after basically they were looked upon as being the winners of the offseason last year, well, that didn't pan out very well. We know Nashville was a big flop last year and ended up finishing quite low in the standings. A lot of the players they brought in, definitely didn't have the most horrible season ever, but they certainly were a drop from their consistent stats that they were used to putting up, right? Like, look at Jonathan Marchessault, who was the prime player that we've talked about as being a potential piece to move there out of the Predators organization. He still hit 20 goals. But, when he'd been 30 to 40 for consistently for quite a while with Vegas and the Conn Smythe Trophy winner, it just wasn't quite up to par. But, when you make a lot of changes, a lot of players, it can take a while to really fit in and kind of gel together. And obviously, I'm sure that's part of it. But, Stamkos, again, he had an okay season, but definitely not the numbers he was used to putting up in Tampa. Brady Shea, his numbers were down. They have made some changes this year. It's not like Nashville hasn't done anything, but I think a lot of people still feel like it's been a quieter offseason just because they were a team that were probably out of all the teams that were most disappointing, that really did a lot worse than people expected. They're probably right at the top of most people's list. So even though they made some changes, it's not significant to the point that you thought you would have seen. Like, they brought in a few different defensemen. They traded for Nick Hag, brought in Nick Perbix through UFA from Tampa. They brought in Eric Howla, which a lot of people were kind of like, I know you're familiar with him, but really, is it somebody you really needed to do that? He's got 1 year on his deal. So he comes in the forward group. And on top of that, you get the very concerning medical update on Roman Josi. I know and maybe I'm the only one that really feels like it's concerning, but the reports seem positive. But with what he's been diagnosed with, to me, I think there could be a lot more complications than the team is letting on. And I hope that it's not the case, because I certainly hope for his own sake that he's able to continue his career and play. But it is not a typical thing with what he's been diagnosed with. So we'll see how things go. But obviously, Kypreos lists Jonathan Marchessault as the main player to watch, mainly because, yes, he has got some trade protection and he can call his own shot here, but there's still a lot of teams looking for top six help. And there's not too many players that have had a lot of, if you look at his contract and the recent success and what he accomplished in Vegas and all that, there's probably a lot of worse bets you could make. He referenced the Oilers, of course, for a team still looking to maybe add a top six forward if they can figure that out. Obviously, cap space is going to play a role in any of these moves, of course. So, it's not the most simple thing to do for some teams. Some teams have the room. Some teams are kind of tight now. Like Toronto's looking for top six help. Ottawa maybe has been rumored to be looking for another top six. They don't really need to do that. They have the internal players they can do that with, but if they wanted to try to really take another step, then that might be something they'll look to do. And I feel like if things don't work out internally, that would probably be a team to watch to do it in season. But Marchessault obviously signed a longer-term contract, $5.5 million. It's not the worst deal, for somebody who can bring that level of experience and the Stanley Cup pedigree. And if he can bounce back to being even close to a 30-goal scorer, he could be a good pickup. Now, where he'll play, I don't know. There was a lot of speculation earlier in the offseason that he would be okay with waiving to go to Montreal. Of course, he's from the province of Quebec, so that would be honestly heading home for him. With all the moves that Montreal has made, I don't see that being an option anymore. I don't know really how seriously they ever looked into it. I mean, I think if we do see anything out of Montreal, it might be for a number two center if that can come together. Otherwise, we'll see them probably try some internal options, and if it's not working out, be an upgrade that they try to make during the season if need be. But again, Marchessault is a player that's out there. There's still some chatter around him, but again, he's going to be able to call a lot of his own shots here, so we'll see where things go. An update as well on the Blue Jackets and the situation with Chinakhov, of course, who we know requested a trade, and his agent's been very public about that here recently. GM Don Waddell has had a chance to comment on that situation, saying he was very surprised by the agent going public. He wasn't surprised with what the agent had to say because they'd already discussed it internally. They'd already were aware that Chinakhov wasn't thrilled with how things played out and that he was looking for a trade. That they knew this. And of course, we had reported on as well recently that when the Blue Jackets were involved in some of the trade conversations around some of the D around the league, primarily Noah Dobson, he was a player that they put in that package to try to acquire a guy like Dobson. And of course, it didn't work out. He went to Montreal, but that's part of the reason why they were willing to move him, was because they knew he wanted to be moved. But essentially, the comments from Waddell kind of, I don't know, I mean, it kind of paints a little bit more clear picture, because the comments from Chinakhov were, I mean, I know part of it was because of the language barrier and not having the best English, but it made it sound like, there's some misunderstandings with the coach and he wants to move. Like, okay. But the way Waddell put it essentially is that Chinakhov got hurt. He came back after eventually, once he returned. He didn't play well. He fell out of favor with the coach. Dean Evison healthy scratched him a few times, and that basically kind of impacted his relationship with the coach, that he wasn't really able to handle it very well. And obviously not handling it well has led to this. So, I can understand from the team's perspective that they're like, wow, geez, he's a younger player. He was playing well. He got hurt, that he wasn't playing well. And if you're not playing well, your role is going to be reduced, and that could lead to a healthy scratch at times. And obviously it didn't go over extremely well. And, well, now here we are. So clearly the Blue Jackets are open to moving him. Waddell said that, ultimately we agreed that we would try to trade him, but we're not going to do it just because they told us to do it. We're going to obviously try to find a deal here that makes sense for the team and something that we feel can hopefully, not only help him get his way, but to help us be as good or better team as well. And until that deal comes along, they're not going to pull the trigger. So we heard plenty, like I said, about Columbus when it comes to the trying to revamp their blue line. And there was some other deal that they were really hoping Aaron Ekblad was going to hit the market. He ended up staying in Florida. They were in on Dobson, and there were some other deal that they were in on as well, which is why they kind of, I think, were humming and hawing around Ivan Provorov and eventually circled back to him. And I think that contract is a bit of an overpayment, but I think they kind of felt like they needed to do that because they couldn't risk losing him and then not getting any of the other guys that they were targeting too. So it's clearly an area of focus for Waddell and the team to make that part better. But again, we'll see what happens. But Chinakhov is a player that they're trying to trade. But again, like the Waddell comment suggests, they're not just going to jump and do it because the agent says so or because he went public. And that I think that the agent's rationale here is to apply pressure. But at this point, they're not really feeling it. So we'll see if that really leads to anything much or not. And then the other piece as well that was in Kiprios' article around the Maple Leafs, I thought was interesting, which were a couple of things we've kind of touched on a bit before, but he does say that as far as he knows, and from what he's been told by his sources, that the Maple Leafs have had discussions with defenseman Morgan Rielly. He said either directly or indirectly. Not sure if they discussed it directly with Morgan himself or through his representatives, but either way, they did discuss about whether or not he would be willing to give any flexibility with his no-move clause to consider a trade and a fresh start with another club. And it doesn't appear as though right now that there was really much of any appetite to do that. So the belief is that the Leafs, as we know, are in a, they've made some moves to kind of to reshake up their forward group. Obviously losing Mitch Marner, a 100-point player last year, a huge part of their offense for as long as he's been there. Also kills penalties for them and just does so much that it's impossible to replace that. And I knew, and like I've said myself, my take is that they're going to have to try to replace this by committee, and they've done that. But the players they've brought in, it could work out, and maybe Brad Treliving will look really good. But at the same time, I think some of these names that they've brought in do come with some risk. Looking at Michelli, of course, who again had a down season, fell out of favor, with a very talented Utah team. Obviously they trade for Dakota Joshua. Joshua is primarily, I think, by most accounts, will say, pretty solid, at most a bottom six guy. So is he going to be able to contribute in any kind of a top six fashion to help replace what Mitch did? No, probably not. I mean, Michelli is probably better suited for a potential top six role. But looking at their top two lines, is a guy like Domi or McMahon or somebody like that is probably going to have to slot in, or maybe Nick Robertson. I guess they could try him again if he's still around. And of course, right now he still needs a contract, and obviously it seems like he's got a future there, at least on a short-term basis. But again, they need to. There's a belief, at least, that they're not done trying to upgrade that group within the forward group, and it's going to probably take trading a D-man from their area of strength to upgrade that. I know there was a lot of chatter earlier in the offseason, should they consider trading Wall or Stolarz, and well, the belief is on that is probably not, which I do concur with. I think if they're going to make a move, it probably should be a D, and if Riley's not willing to play ball I know Kypreos feels that Brandon Carlo is going to be a name to watch. Now, I know he hasn't been there long, but we know the right shot defensemen, especially one with size like him, typically have some pretty high value. And if they can find a trade in a more of a hockey type trade where they can bring in a higher end forward who's better suited for top six duty to either play with, whether it's with Nylander, Tavares, or more of a Nyes and Matthews type of role, that's probably something they would seriously consider doing. Like I said, they're not going to replace Marner's production with one guy, but the fact with what they've brought in, it just seems there is some risk associated with it. And it's not that they're not good players. It's just, is it the right mix? And if they can get more of a sure bet, then that's something they probably want to do. But again, if you're a Maple Leaf fan, would you be willing to subtract from that back end, especially if it's a guy like Carlo who you just got and you gave up a pretty good, return to Boston to bring him in? But, I guess it boils down to who it is. It's hard to really say, I think, without knowing who the player coming in is, but they may not have a choice. Otherwise, they're going to have a different group of forwards. Hopefully a more balanced approach. Like I said, you're going to have maybe some duos. You got like Matthews, Nyes. You can have maybe Tavares, Nylander. Who's your third line? It's going to be more of a Domi, McMahon type of guy. It's hard to say. Where's Joshua fit? Is he more of a fourth liner? And then kind of plug in some extra players here for spot duty. It's tough, right? When you lose a player like Burner, it's super tough to replace. So we'll see what they end up doing. But I do concur with Kypreos that if they're going to trade from an area of strength to bring in a top-notch forward, or at least a stronger one than they've been able to find so far, it probably will come at a cost of a blue liner. But let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.